Good afternoon, everybody. It is truly a pleasure to be back in Singapore. And it's my deepest wish that I was there with you and not sitting here where I am at the moment at my mother's house in Ohio. Today's theme, 2021, our new world order. What's going to come? We all know this little virus. Very often I'm often asked if I'm sitting in a little bench looking up into the sky as I think about the future, and the answer is no. I wish I could, but not all the time. Usually I'm also, like all of us, trying to calm thoughts and pull together what's happening and make sense of what's happening tomorrow and today. But one thing we do know is that our economies, our lives in so many places around the world went from full speed to zero. There was a great emptiness, just like here at ETH in Zurich, where I now work, or in the trams all over the world, or in the skies, no longer flying, or this is sometimes a good thing, actually, very short control lines. I mean, bad for business, but good for the traveler. But there's also great togetherness, which we've been feeling. And to me, it's really fascinating to look at these different types of togethernesses, these way in which we have, like we are right now, come together in this Zoom, this digital world where many thought it would be impossible to transform our businesses. And all of a sudden now we're interacting in this way as a matter of the new normal. And the question for all of us is really, what will normal look like in our really crazy VUCA world? What curves are we going to see, and when are we going to see them? Which ones will return? Which ones are going to keep the way they are forever? Which one will be bent? Which ones will continue to fall? But really, what will normal look like? This is on all of our minds, every single one of us, from the prime minister down to the youngest, newest newborn baby. Okay, maybe the newborn babies aren't thinking about what normal will be like. They're just trying to figure out what the world's going to be like. But in any case, we're all trying to think about that. And as our good friend Peter Ho always says, it is complicated and it's complex. What's interesting for me is to think about these two issues and the question of how it has impacted us really has depended upon whether you sit, or stand to work. Huge difference how this has impacted us. Huge impact if you're sitting. But we can go home. But if you're standing, what happens there? Interesting to think of the difference. COVID-19 has been an accelerator of the inevitable. Failing business models have only failed faster. The digital transformation, which is no longer the someday or being discussed in all of the halls and conference rooms, there's a someday is now a must. And how could we not have transformed? It has also increased the appreciation of moments which really matter. Sort of a rediscovery of this interaction. And I truly believe this has been, for me, a fascinating insight. The efficiency of the transactional. How many people still want to go across the city to a meeting which takes 15 minutes, which you could have easily done on Zoom? The desire for the interpersonal, like I would love to be able to be there with you, to be able to afterwards go and have a dinner together. The importance of this and the necessity of the meandering and the creative. I have yet to find a digital media which is actually as good as sitting together around a table with a whiteboard. And so we've actually figured out the differences between these. We've also have an incredibly increased awareness of global supply chains. There is a dearth of items which were unexpected and a rediscovery of the possibility of local in different parts of the world. The question of how can we become more local? It's also been a crash course in the fragility of globalization. It was shockingly easy to close up borders. Here in Europe, I was shocked at how quickly the borders between the European nations just went up. The armies were mobilized, and boom. And actually, it's been a crash course in this understanding of the new global order. The question for all of us, of course, is where will these new alliances lead? What will this new global order look like? So, what will normal look like? Well, we've been seeing it. And for us, now the question is of stickiness. What will stick? Because we are going to have a vaccine. This virus will become part of every one of our DNAs, of yours and of mine. So, what will stick? Well, one thing we do know that when flying into Washington just a few weeks ago, on November 6th or 7th, there was a big question of stickiness with the outgoing president and how sticky he would be. But we do know, I'm just going to leave that to the side. We do know that the new normal is going to look a lot like it did a year ago, right? Marina Bay is going to still be a magnet. It's going to still be stunning. The gardens by the bay are going to be blooming. It's going to be gorgeous. It's going to be hotter than heck in summer, right? So the normal is still going to look a lot like it did a year ago. Chicago is still going to be an endless city of lights. San Francisco is still going to have the Golden Gate Bridge. Central Park, all of these urban areas are still going to remain vibrant as they have for hundreds or thousands of years. It's not going to go away. Right? This is for me quite interesting and quite important. We'll still be wondering where our food is going to come from, whether it's the fish farms or whether it's food farms. But what is going to be different is going to be a digital twist. And this is what we have seen. And we know that digital twist is real. And the question for all of us is, of course, what do we do with this new digital twist? Because change is constant. None of us can stop it. And here we see the urban heat island effect across the nation from this, and this is so fascinating for me to see what can we do to cool Singapore. This comes from the Singapore ETH Center and in Singapore, this research on the future, designing the future. Everything inconvenient will change. So all we have to do is think about points of inconvenience in our daily lives. And this is where design has its forte, to understand how to change those things, right? To look at those points of inconvenience and to deeply understand them as we change as humans. Think about our port. We're already thinking about the next and the next port. At one time, it was beautifully important and convenient to have those ships come into the city. And now we don't want them anywhere close to us. We want them way out there. So the definition of convenience changes with time as well. But the interesting thing now, complexity is now free. Now that I find fascinating. When we print steel, when we print concrete, when we do 3D printing, it doesn't matter to the machine whether it's a straight line or a curved line. So the question then becomes for us, what are we going to do with this new fact that complexity is free? What are we going to do? This is a design challenge that is phenomenal. Not only this physical complexity, but also the digital complexity. And you can argue whether or not you like the forms. That's perfectly valid. But now we can free ourselves into new ways of thinking that we could not even begin to do 10 years ago. Incredibly wonderful time, especially when we're looking at the challenges of climate change, of sea level rise, of biodiversity loss, of the great extinction which we're feeling. So what can we be doing to change that? We're also in an era of augmentation. And this is for me totally fascination, pardon me. And this is totally fascinating in the building world, where we can now, with digital tools, recreate many crafts that we lost, that we totally lost. Or we can use augmented reality to understand how to bend metal into forms, which our designers can create. And then the craftsmen and women can bend into place using their goggles or put blocks together just for fun. Or we know that construction is a very dangerous profession, right? It destroys a man or a woman's body. So now with exoskeletons, with augmenting our physical capability, we can change that. Or we can augment our capabilities in construction and in design so we can get the best of the human and the machine. So we're actually focusing on what people do best and what machines do best to create a whole new hybrid design vocabulary here. Some stone hewn by hand, but with holes drilled with millimeter, sub-millimeter precision by drills through the stone. This is the Sagrada Familia Cathedral in Barcelona. Another thing that we do know, in looking into the future, anything that can be automated will be automated. Now, for many, this is terrifying because they know that their job is easily automated. For others, it's liberating because they'll think about, if that part's automated, we can do this. So all of us in the design community need to be thinking about everything that can be automated will be. So what does that mean next? What can we be doing with this new capability? Now, a few other things that go along with this. One is a democratization of tools. It used to be the domain of specialists to have specialist knowledge in tools. But now with the internet and with the digital transformation, we have this deep democratization of tool sets. So the question is, what do we do as a designer, as an engineer, as an architect, as just any person on the street? We also have a popularization of those techniques through YouTube. You can now teach yourself anything. I mean, truly anything. So you no longer have to purely be a specialist. You can learn it yourself. And the final thing with this is just now a ubiquity of data. And this is quite fascinating. It's not always good data, but there's a lot of data that can be mined and understood. So we understand patterns of human behavior, patterns of city behavior, patterns of natural behavior that we could never understand before. And the last two, there has to be, and I believe there will be, a systemic acceptance of the digital transformation. Most bureaucracies don't like change, and Singapore has been quite fascinating because there's been an encouragement of change through the Digital Nation, Digital Singapore initiatives. And so how can we continue to increase the systemic acceptance of these changes and integrate them into our practices as individuals, as professionals? So that for me is quite interesting because we all stand at a moment in time of profound change, personal change, environmental change, political change. And the question for all of us that we have to ask is, what decisions are we going to be making to push us in one direction or another? And that for me is a very important thing. Like the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of these goals have been agreed by every nation in the world. And every one of those, plus the 169 indicators which stand behind them, are things which I believe everyone should look at. Now, I don't expect everyone to remember all of them, but look at them and understand them because all of these are critical. We talk about shaping a better world. This is the better world which we need to be shaping towards. Because if we look at the consumption of stuff, this graph shows the time and the growth of GDP and tracks typically as the world gets richer, as people lift themselves out of poverty, we consume more stuff. We can't keep doing that. We can't keep doing this. A great-grandfather said, "We are too poor to buy cheap stuff." Why would you ever buy anything which you know you're going to throw away 3 months from now, or build? You're going to tear it down 3 years from now. This leads to the circular economy. All of us have an incredibly important role to play in that, and to understand how we can get this by design to be restorative, And Singapore is playing a very focused role in this. I encourage you to make sure you're looking at this and to take a look at this book, Collapse by Jared Diamond, and just take a look at a couple of the graphs. What happens for civilizations to fail, environmental damage, climate change, hostile neighbors, weak trade partners, and a failure to solve societal problems. We stand at that precipice. And so we then also have the role in trying to co-create, co-author the future, which will then have a positive impact and not go down a negative spiral. A piece of homework for you as a recovering academic is from Kate Raworth, Donut Economics. It has the social foundation in the middle, the SDGs, the outer side is the planetary boundaries. Please take a look at this. This is where we have to get to. It's your only piece of homework from me. Darwin said it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. We are an intelligent species. So we then have to be the ones who adapt to the changes around us. And we understand that we know what's happening in this changing world. Knowledge is a commodity. What you do with it is what matters. And this is critical for me. Think about what we do with the knowledge which you have. You have the gift of knowledge, the gift of understanding what's happening to our world around us. Be curious. Make the difference so that you can look at the next generations straight in the eye and say, I did everything I could to make your life better. Reserved for future development. Let's make sure that future development is positive. Thank you ever so much, Singapore, for inviting me to come back to you, and I can't wait to see you again. Thank you.